Stoneman Willie was embalmed 128 years ago and is only going to be buried this weekend. And this story just blows my mind. So in 1895, Stoneman Willie was actually an inmate in one of Reading's prisons, and he gave the name James Penn, which he admitted was not his real name. Some say James Penn, some say William Penn. He's not the William Penn. So he was arrested for burglary, and while he was incarcerated, he actually started going through alcohol withdrawal, and he tried to unalive himself by tying a handkerchief around his neck into the bar, but when he did that, it snapped and didn't work. And he died in prison from advanced alcoholism. And no one knows who he actually is because he never gave a real name, and he did tell one of his cellmates that he had a brother and a sister, and he didn't want to bring dishonor to their name by saying who he really was. Now, since he had no one to claim who he was, he died in prison. They have no idea who this guy's real identity is. They're like, what do we do with the body? And you got to realize this is 1895. This is around the time where they were figuring out, like, how do we preserve bodies? They used to ship bodies in barrels of rum. They would put them on ice, and now they had this guy and they had no idea who he was, and they're like, well, how do we preserve him? In comes Auman's funeral home, who is basically like, we'll take the body because we're trying all this stuff with embalming. Let's try to embalm him and see if we can preserve the body until like next of kin or someone comes and identifies him. So they go and embalm the body. I don't know if this is how you embalm the body, but this is how I'm showing you they embalm the body. Immediately petrified, like immediately mummified. This is where the name Stoneman Willie comes from, because he literally just like turned to stone. That's not the weird part. So no one ever came to claim Stoneman Willie, and Auman's is like, well, this is a pretty cool thing. So they actually put him on display in the funeral home, and they would take like field trips, like kids' field trips would go to the funeral home where he was on display, and they would visit the body, and he was just out there for people to see. And then it reached a point, you know, over 100 years later, where people are like, well, maybe this isn't cool, so maybe we should move him to the basement. So they moved him to the basement, and then they're like, well, I don't think this is really cool. Reading is celebrating their 275th anniversary, so they're like, what better weekend to give Stoneman Willie a proper burial after all this time? So the unidentified man, known as Stoneman Willie, the one who was embalmed 128 years ago, is going to finally be laid to rest this weekend. And apparently they're going to put him on like this like carriage thing, and it's going to be like a procession down the street to where he's finally going to meet his resting place. A little overdue.